I built out a template of what is the $100 million valuation version of this business look like. Once the week of closing hit, that's when fear really set in. I see a lot of searchers getting themselves tripped up because they're chasing like HVAC because they're great businesses. But if it's not a great business for you, then it doesn't really matter.
Hi, I'm Kate Chichi, and welcome to Deal Diaries, where business owners share how they bought and sold businesses so we don't have to learn the hard way. Let's dive in. When most people hear printing business, they think dyeing industry. Connor Pera would disagree. Connor acquired the Print Authority in Nashville in 2023 while working full-time at Mars and with a baby on the way. He has doubled the business from $2 million to $4 million in revenue and acquired his second business last summer. Connor, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
So Connor, on top of doing your own searches for the two businesses that you acquired, you've had over 300 conversations with other searchers. From your experience, what makes a successful searcher?
I would say from like a qualitative standpoint, one of the things I've been surprised by is how really basic things are the traits that lead to successful outcomes in search. And what I mean by that is like people who follow up and people who take you up on your offer for help. Like I almost always say at some point during those conversations, if there's anything I can do to be helpful, let me know. 99% of people like do not take me up on that offer. And then the other thing I would say that I've observed, people who provide regular updates on their search to like a small group of people. Like when I was searching, I had like a small group of advisors, mentors, etc., that I would provide a monthly update on like, here's what I did and learned this month. Like, here's a deal that I'm interested in or looking at. And then like, here's how you can help me. And then just like some color commentary around, kind of what I'm thinking and why. I actually do something similar. I don't have any investors, but I do something similar every 6 months. So I provide a small group of people with like an update. And it's like I got to figure out a better system for this, but it's like a 3 or 4 page document of it. It's really like sort of like an in-depth reflection on like what I'm observing in our industry, the business, and just like lessons that I'm learning as an operator, as well as like kind of how we're performing as a business. That just drives more accountability.
You're so right. Providing those updates primarily is just an excellent source of accountability. And then on top of that, you can get feedback from the people that are on your newsletter. To take it back to your story, so your first taste of entrepreneurship was starting a vending machine business. How has that shaped your mindset on entrepreneurship?
The switch that it flipped in me was I'm not physically present and I'm able to make money on an asset that produces cash flow. It's very like much not passive, but you do separate your direct involvement from an ability to generate cash flow. And you can kind of understand that intellectually, but until you feel it and experience it, it really kind of changes you. It changed me in a big way. And I also noticed I just loved tinkering. And I loved how so much of, trying to start that business was just all about just hustle and just like having to figure it out. When I sold my first location, I didn't even have a machine. And I didn't even know where I was going to get the machine, right? It was just like, I'm in there like selling this product and service and knowing that like, oh, the meeting's going well, like ended up with a signed contract. And then I'm like, all right, I got to go figure out like how to get a machine and place it here. That was like really fun. I had never done anything like that. So anyone who's like a founder who's built anything probably, can relate to that experience. And I think it's like both terrifying, but also exhilarating, right? At the same time. And the other big thing I observed, and this was like while I was working, I was making like a few $100 in profit per month from the vending business, but I found myself like spending like my energy and enthusiasm was like way higher for that than the job that was like paying all the bills. So I was like, maybe I should pursue entrepreneurship more intentionally.
I love how it both unlocked leverage and passion for entrepreneurship. So still staying a little bit in that time, you were in a corporate job with a baby on the way, and then you decide to acquire a business. What drove that decision?
Well, partially the baby on the way, but I would say I had gotten exposed to ETA when I was in business school and got a job after business school. And then I was like, working on this side hustle business. And so at a certain point, in my corporate career, I decided like I'm going to buy a business next. Like that's the thing I'm going to do next. Then the question became like, when do I want to make that leap? I didn't have any problems with the job I had. Like I enjoyed the work I was doing, enjoyed the people I worked with, and it was fun. But I did also feel like a little bit of pressure from a family perspective in the sense that like I knew that, my wife and I were planning to start a family. And I knew that, once our daughter was here, life was going to get busier and more complicated. And now we have two little ones. In retrospect, I'm really glad I made the leap when I did because like right now it would be a lot harder, but like I'm already here. So I just foresaw that like it was, if I keep putting it off, I'm going to have more and more excuses to keep putting it off. And then also I think like, some things were going on with my role that I just kind of felt like this is definitely one of those situations where I'm going to be playing the corporate game for the next 15 to 20 years to kind of get to the level I want to get to. And yeah, I just I don't want to wait my turn. I don't want to wait in line. The other piece too is like continuing to progress in my corporate job again, like your income just goes up, right? So it gets harder and harder to leave. And I was at a good spot and where the math still kind of made sense.
It's harder to take that paycheck cut the farther you go.
You got to go bigger and bigger on the business you buy, more competitive deals, like all those kind of things.
Exactly. So it sounds like the lesson is start as early as you think of it.
I have yet to talk to a single entrepreneur who wishes they had started.
And to talk a bit more about the search, so you have an interesting direction here because most searchers tend to go full time. You, on the other hand, did your search part time while working full time. How did you make that work?
Yeah, I mean, it was we didn't have kids yet, so that was a big piece of it. And I think for me, it was very much like an iterative process, right? It was like I made the decision that like I'm gonna do that next, right? And then it was like my wife and I had settled in Nashville and we wanted to stay in the area. And then so it became a question of like, okay, well, I'm by choice like geographically constrained to Middle Tennessee. So like right there, I'm like limiting my deal universe pretty substantially. And so I was pretty industry agnostic, but I was also like, there's also some advantages to going local from a relationship standpoint. Like you can build, is that like depth versus breadth, right? Like you can build deep relationships with, people that are in the small business M&A world. And so I kind of felt like, okay, like let me, start networking, talking to people. I was looking at business listings, like kind of thinking through like what my deal criteria might be, like all those things, consuming a lot of like ETA related content and stuff. And at a certain point I was like, okay, well, like what's like, I might as well just like actually start looking, like actually starting conversations with people. I'm already doing like a lot of the research. I'm like doing this in my free time for like fun anyway. Um, so I might as well like put some structure behind it and actually like start to develop a search and actually like start doing stuff. And so then I crossed that bridge and then it was like, okay, well, let's like see how much progress I can make in the next 6 to 12 months. After that, I'm not making the progress I want to make. And I think it makes sense to go full time, then I will do that. But ended up finding the opportunity we closed on pretty quickly into my search.
And what did the day to day look like for you in that 6 to 12 month timeline?
I had like this big goal, right? Like I wanted to buy a business with this list of criteria. And that's hard to accomplish in a couple days. But like, you just like any goal in life, like you just kind of back into like okay, well, what can I do like this week to get closer to that reality? And so for me, like like cornerstone part of my process was like on Sunday afternoon, I would write down 3 things that I could do that week that would progress toward this big goal that would, move me closer. And then, yeah, for me, it was like a lot of early mornings and stuff too.
So you're working Sundays, you're working on this before work on weekdays. And what do these goals actually look like? What is the actual work of the search?
So, for example, one of them was to reach out to 5 brokers, right? Like very like bite-sized, like manageable. I even like think about this the way we operate the business too. Setting a goal to achieve a result is a good thing to do, but then breaking that result into controllable action steps that will yield the results I'm looking for. So it's like in my case, I want to meet with brokers in person. I kind of felt like if I could meet a broker in person, had like a better chance of hopefully like convincing that broker that I was a serious person and worth sending deals to. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you get a meeting? Like you got to, reach out. And then it's like reaching out, whether or not I reach out to a broker is like entirely within my control. Now, I don't, I can't control if they respond, but if I reach out to enough, I will get a certain percentage that respond. Right. So like, it's kind of like just backing into like, okay, well, what can I do that I can say this is either done or not? My experience was that it quickly generated momentum, and then once like I had enough momentum going, it was like it almost became this like I had like activity that would like now I was responding to, inbound inquiries or like responding to replies. Now it's like an active thing that I'm like now managing. And so then, you just kind of snowball from there.
I really like the idea of having goals, the outcome of which you can control. Because as you said, you can't control who will respond, but you can at least control the amount of outreach that you do. And in this outreach, what are the criteria that you were communicating to brokers?
Well, to brokers, I was mostly just communicating, that I was looking for something with a 500,000 or more of SDE based in Middle Tennessee. But I told them like I was basically flexible on industry, but wanted to own and operate something that was a relatively straightforward and easy to understand business model. So like that was another thing I had from my little vending side hustle was like it was a very easy to understand business model, right? It's like I buy products and then I sell them. Like that's a very intuitive business model. So because of that, like a lot of like software stuff was and IT related stuff was less interesting to me, even though those can be great businesses.
You mentioned that you needed to prepare to have the brokers take you seriously. What did that entail?
Well, I think, brokers get a lot of inbound from a lot of people who aren't actually serious about acquiring businesses. And so I think it's just a matter of convincing them that you're a credible buyer with the ability to close a transaction. So, in my case, I'd gone to a good business school, so I definitely like used that. The other thing that I found to be very effective was knowing other service providers in the area that were in like the ETA ecosystem. So like I have a relationship with an SBA lender, was like a really well-known SBA lender in the Nashville area. And the fact that I knew her and was in touch with her helped bolster my credibility with brokers too. So stuff like that. I think it's just like, if you yourself don't have credibility to an objective third party, then use other people's credibility and stand in front of it.
So you ended up buying a printing company. What made the print authority appealing to you apart from it being local and, as you said, a somewhat more simple business to understand?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I consistently like leaned into was I got a really good impression that the previous owner was a high integrity, highly intelligent individual who had built really good business. I mean, the thing that kind of caught my attention was like he started in the early 90s, looking to exit in, 22, and had managed to grow revenue and profitability consistently, like over that stretch of time when the printing industry like totally transformed, like the internet was invented, right? So many things digitized. There's a lot of durability to this business model. Also, the printing industry is one of the oldest industries in the world. Putting custom information on physical medium, there's a lot of industries I would say are going to die before that just because like it's been around for so long.
It's like 600 years or something?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's literally like 600 years. I mean, I don't know, like what else is older than that? Like transportation and logistics, like that's probably similarly aged. Obviously, like a lot has changed in how consumers consume the category. And then specifically, like kind of double clicking into what we do within printing, we do a lot of what's called web to print. So we build custom web portals for multi-location brands. So we do a lot of stuff in the franchising space. And load all of their like products and it's like a whole contract process, right? Like we're a contracted vendor with contracted pricing for these products, a lot of printed materials, but then also promotional products and apparel. And then they're on a portal. And then part of like in a franchise context, part of like what you're signing up for when you join a franchise is, vendor relationships. And so, we're the recommended provider for these items that they need printed regularly. If we do a good job on like those first few orders, they're happy. Like they're likely going to continue to order. And then we kind of like develop that habit. But again, like we're positioning ourselves to succeed with a durable customer need in a way that people consume the category. Like how do people buy like anything? They like want to do it online. Like everyone just wants to like order something and like quickly click through a couple of screens and like just want it to be like convenient and easy. So there's a lot of like setup and back and forth that goes into that. But like at the end of the day, like if we can be that provider for franchisor and all of their franchisees, like order from us and love using us, like it's a pretty sticky relationship, certainly a lot more embedded than one-off project work, which, we also do quite a bit of as well. I would say about 60% of our business is web to print portal based revenue, with the other 40% being more typical. Like a lot of that is repeat in nature, but it's not truly programmatic and like on a portal. But yeah, and then we do a bit of one-off projects as well.
So it sounds like high integrity owner. The business existed for over 25 years, if not more.
Yeah, 32 when I bought it.
Oh,
Yeah.
32. And then the industry has existed for hundreds of years
Mhm.
and will hopefully survive through AI and also very sticky customer relationships.
Yeah. And then I think the other big thing was like I saw an opportunity. Previous owner had started doing SEO content marketing, actually like coming out of the '08 financial crisis as a way to broaden the company's customer reach, because just everything had just slowed down so much. But because of that, like we really punch above our weight on Google. Actually, if you Google franchise printing companies, we're typically like one of the top organic results. Yeah, because of that, we get leads through people finding us on Google, and then we have a lot of long term relationships, both portal and non portal based relationships, but people who order from us frequently and have been customers for a really long time. And but what we didn't have when I bought the business, truly like an outbound sales process and infrastructure. But I saw a big opportunity that was aligned with what I wanted to do as a business owner. So another thing I like really leaned into was just business buyer fit, which I think is an underrated thing. Like I see a lot of searchers chasing like home services businesses because they're really popular. And those are like really great businesses. But I think if I did anything like well during my search, like I just never like wanted to run a plumbing company. Like that's not I don't like come from a blue collar background. Like I grew up in a, upper middle class, suburban kind of environment. I don't come from like a trades family or like I just didn't see myself as like the owner of a plumbing company and like leading a plumbing crew. Like I just that's not me. And so I think like again, if I did anything well, it was like those are great businesses, but they're not a great business for me. I see a lot of searchers getting themselves tripped up because they're chasing like HVAC is a good example I always use, but like because they're great businesses. But if it's not a great business for you, then it doesn't really matter. Right.
For
Like
sure.
anyway.
For sure. And it sounds like this was such a good fit for you with your marketing skills, perfectly applied to grow the business.
Yeah, exactly. I just felt like this is a good fit. It's a good opportunity. It's not perfect, but like, um, I knew perfect was not an option, and I felt like, man, I could pass on this and wait for something more perfect or closer aligned to what I want. And I felt like that could be 2 months from now, but it could also be like 2 years from now. And if it was going to be 2 years from now, I was like, I don't want to wait 2 years. Like I want to get in the operator seat.
Yeah. That's the tricky thing with a search that you never know when the opportunity is going to come. So I feel like setting timelines is very helpful and setting
Yeah.
deadlines.
It is so hard, especially if you start thinking about like, are you buying the optimal business? That's kind of like a false choice because you're picking from an available set of assets that are transitory set, right? It's like some of them are going to transact, and then there's going to be new ones that come in, but like you don't know when or how or what. Like, so you're just like, it's like a moment in time. It's really hard. Yeah. Yeah.
And how did you structure the deal?
Yeah. So it was like, it was pretty standard in like a lot of ways. It was a combination of bank debt. I did a conventional loan, similar in features and form to the SBA program, but it was a conventional non SBA term loan with a local regional bank. It's still personally guaranteed though. So I have a unlimited personal guarantee. So, and then there was an earnout with the previous owner, and then equity. It was about, I think it was like 15% equity, and then the rest was bank debt. I think something like that.
And what made you go with a conventional bank over SBA?
Yeah. One of the people that was like instrumental in helping me diligence and close the deal was a good friend of mine who works in the small business M&A space. He does like fractional CFO stuff, but then he also does some M&A advisory. He gave me like kind of a list of a handful of banks who he thought like might do a conventional loan on like a, acquisition, a small business acquisition. He's like, you're going to get like better, more flexible terms, a lower rate, and it just like speed to close. He's like, so, I would encourage you to pursue that as an option. And so I just, I tried to find banks when I was under LOI. They're like, I was like pre-LOI, I was like kind of simultaneously. I was like, felt like we were going to get assigned LOI soon. So I started like kind of shopping it. And then, yeah, this bank was like, yeah, well, we're interested. Like, let's talk about it. Because I had that option, it like never really pursued the SBA route because I had a conventional option. The term is, when I closed the deal, the term in the AM was 5 years. So like we're talking about just like significantly tighter
Yeah.
debt service coverage, even at a lower rate. In hindsight, and even to this day, a little bit, like there's a trade off in that, like I pay more in absolute terms month to month on my acquisition loan. But the good side is like I pay it off faster if I succeed. That's an if, right? So, but the chances of failure shrink every day.
Well, it looks like you're already succeeding. So the conventional loan is more flexible. The interest rates are lower, but it is shorter. So you have to
Yeah,
pay
and
the loan faster.
typically, like, you're gonna again, I think this was just an exception due to market timing. They financed, I wanna say they financed, like, a little over 70% of the deal, but typically, like, they're not gonna do that kinda LTV. But typically, you're gonna have to bring more cash.
So you did 70% loan, and then what was the remainder ratio of equity? And did you put any cash down?
Yeah, I think it was 15-15 or, like, 12-18, something like that.
Can you speak a bit more about structuring the earnout?
There's a lot that goes into this, different earnout approaches and structure. I actually like it as like a negotiating mechanism because I think it aligns incentives and I think it kind of like shares risk in a really good way. Ours was revenue based. I think it's like the easiest, cleanest way to structure it. A lot of people like pursue this like EBITDA, which is really what you want to do, but there's a lot more subjectivity in how that gets measured. But to me, it was just like it was a tool to mitigate the fact that the previous owner owned customer relationships directly. So the risk that I was trying to mitigate against was for some of the key customers, what is the likelihood that because he's the primary owner of the relationship that they stay on with a new owner? Of course, his perspective was they would if we managed it well. My perspective was I'm not doubting that, but also like this is a lot of risk to sign up for it too, because I don't know, right? Like I'm not in that seat. Yeah, so it was really just like I kind of thought through like for the key accounts, like what do I think the percentage chance that they leave is, and then kind of like backed into some numbers around that were revenue based around like okay, here's if revenue is this for and it was measured on like a quarterly basis. If it's at this level, then I'll pay out this amount. At this level, I'll pay out this amount. And so it was kind of a scale based on how much revenue there was in the business as a whole.
And did the seller stay on after the acquisition?
He was, we had like a 6-week transition period.
So you get to closing. Tell me about the emotions that you're experiencing around that time.
Yeah, I was like insanely nervous. I think because of like the process I outlined to you around like how I structured my search, it was so much of it was like incremental, right? It was just like do the next like kind of step. Um and I was just kind of like following that template and approach. And even during like sending the LOI and during diligence, like it was just like, okay, I'm going to do these few things. I would say like once the week of closing hit, that's when it like really started to like the fear really set in. I actually reached out to a friend of mine who I know through the ETA community and was like, hey man, like I'm really struggling emotionally like with this. Like, is this normal? Like, can you help me talk talk through this? He's like, it's totally normal. He's like, I'd be concerned if you weren't nervous.
Mm.
So I think like that helped put me at ease. But yeah, I think it was, it was definitely like it's one of those moments that's like tricky because I do think, and I think like so much of, I mean, owning a business, but certainly like doing deals, my observation has been like so much of it is like an inside job of like how much you as a leader are like willing to work on your emotional and like mental development. I think the same way about like growing the business because so much like I'm the one in the way of the business achieving what it can. But like as it relates to just like the magnitude of dealing with like a closing, it's like tough because anxiety and fear is a valuable signal, right? If you meet someone and you have anxiety and fear or something just like doesn't sit right about that person, particularly if you're about to buy their business, like that's a sign that you should probably like not go into business with that person, right? But then there's also like anxiety and fear that is just like normal human emotion when you're making a big decision, right? Or like starting a new job. We've all experienced that like first day of work. It's like the dream job, but like you're still really nervous, right? Like, and so it's like that's not necessarily bad fear. That's just fear that you just need to sit with and get over. Uh, and so that was like that's like the hard thing I think to distinguish on like these deal closings is like, is this anxiety and fear that's telling me like, oh no, I've made a mistake and this is not the right situation, or is this just like anxiety and fear that is just normal part of the process? And so I concluded it was the latter.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like not enough people talk about the emotions of
Yeah,
closing
yeah.
the deal and that fear and the anxiety that is so normal. So just knowing that it's a normal part of the experience is very helpful in addressing the emotion. So you get to closing. Walk me through what the first 90 days post acquisition were like. And looking back, what mattered the most and what do you wish you would have known going in?
Yeah, I think what matters the most is like that I think we often don't think about as acquisition entrepreneurs with like an investor mindset is like the team dynamic and the culture. That was one of the reasons I was interested in the business. A lot of the employees had been with the business for a long time. I kind of felt like, oh, that'll be helpful as a new owner, but also felt like it said a lot of good things about the business that people had, chose to spend decades of their career here. So that was like a huge positive. You're never going to avoid people being uncomfortable and scared and worried about what this means for their job. But I think that cannot be emphasized enough how important it is for people to feel like, okay, this is a big change and I don't know what this means, but I'm going to give it a shot kind of thing. Like, I think that's kind of what the conclusion you want people to arrive at. So I think, yeah, just like managing the human capital side of it is like super important.
What would you suggest to do from a management standpoint to make people feel more comfortable with the transition?
So I just took everyone out to lunch over the course of several weeks. Obviously, like people had their guards over. Like, how much can you like really build a meaningful relationship where somebody's gonna fully trust you? It just takes time. That's what we spent most of the first day doing. We made the announcement in the morning, and then I met with each person like one by one. And so meeting me and me like kind of just giving my spiel about me and what I'm trying to do and I'm here to learn and listen. And the reason I bought the business is because you guys are already successful. So like, I'm not trying to make a bunch of changes type of thing. I think, yeah. And I think just like gestures, like taking people out to lunch type of thing, you just want to improve the trust, right? Over the first 90 days. Yeah. So I think thinking about it from the standpoint of like, what can I do to improve my relationship with each individual person? And it's hard, but I think it just starts with like, it's like trying to get to know people.
Yeah, with a human touch.
Yeah.
So take people out to lunch, have one-on-one meetings, and reassure them that you're there to learn from them and keep them on.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is a little bit tricky too because you don't want to be like, "Don't worry, your job's safe," right? Because if somebody's not performing or they're a bad culture fit, like you just don't want to sign yourself up for committing to something. Then you end up saying, actually, we're going to have to part ways. So you can't be overly reassuring, but you also don't want people to think I'm coming in here to bulldoze the business. And
Yeah.
that just creates uncertainty and fear and all those things. So yeah, it's tough. I would say the other big thing post acquisition that I've learned and gotten better at is just like managing working capital. Now I use a cash flow forecast and I'm like update it weekly and like religious about, the inputs and all that kind of stuff. Put it this way, if I was to acquire like a similarly sized company, like I would use the cash flow forecast I use for this business and just like copy and paste it for that situation. And I would feel a lot more confident in my ability to manage the working capital on day one. But some of that just comes with experience. But yeah, I wish I had built that sooner.
Yeah. Talking about acquiring another business. So you acquired a quality printing company last summer. That is your
Mhm.
second acquisition. So now that you've done both organic growth and growth through acquisition, how do you think about each and what pulled you towards acquiring again?
When I was introduced to ETA, I always saw finding the deal and doing the deal as like a necessary evil to get to where I wanted to be, which was in the owner CEO seat. But I really enjoyed it. Like putting the deal together and negotiating. I love that today. I would say like some of the things that stimulate me the most are like negotiations, like these like dynamic games that happen within a big business context. That's really intellectually stimulating to me. So I started just prospecting local printing businesses because my thinking was like, okay, there's all these print shops that are, really like subscale that can't exit to a buyer that's not somebody who's just going to acquire their customer list. And a lot of them are owned by baby boomers and they don't have a succession plan. And those customers have to go somewhere. So I used the PPP data and just like put together a list of all these printers in the area that I could reach out to. And I sent a bunch of them individual letters, just basically saying like, I'm an entrepreneur, bought the print authority last year. I'm looking to acquire additional printing businesses. If you're open to a conversation about exiting, love to talk. Couple of like specific things I did. I put those letters on company letterhead and then I put them in a 10 by 13 flat mailer. It's a little more expensive to mail, but I actually knew because the first 12 months, maybe even more, that I owned the business, I opened the mail here every day. So I knew that something that was 8.5 by 11 size, if the owner is the one who's opening the mail, like that's going to get their attention more than like just another letter.
I love that. And you're in the perfect business to send out printed out
Yeah,
mailed
yeah, yeah.
letters. Did you send any emails?
No, I didn't. My approach with that was I'm going to send out a bunch of letters. I'll see what kind of response I get. Put my email on the letters, and then I would coordinate meeting and do all that stuff via email. I think like trying to message to my audience, right? Like a physical letter and a note that said like, give me a call. Here's my number.
Not a t-shirt with a print of "Let's talk about buying you"?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Sell me your print business. No, I didn't do that. But yeah, and so I had a surprisingly high response rate. It was probably like 10 to 15% of people responded. Most of those being
Very
like,
high.
yeah, like most of those are like, no, I'm not interested. But I had a couple of conversations and then I had people that were interested in pursuing the conversation more. So my thinking was really like buying growth, right? And if I can do it in a structure that's advantageous, then and the math works, then that's incremental to the business and like that's going to increase the value.
How much revenue were you able to add with this acquisition?
It was like 10%. So it was about a quarter million in revenue.
In comparison, how much effort or time or money do you think it would have cost you to add that via organic growth?
Well, turns out probably not as much as I thought, but yeah, I mean, so that's like the big thing, right? Like I think the numbers work, the math makes sense, assuming the earnings are, you know, what they say they are, which I didn't do like a Q of E or anything, but I did validate that with bank recs and taxes and stuff. But that financial arbitrage mindset ignores is like the opportunity cost of the effort and energy and time and focus that it takes to manage the integration and those customers and like whether or not those customers are a fit for like what we do. So like from a like web portal standpoint, we didn't acquire any new portal contracts with that acquisition. We did acquire like customers that are pretty well aligned to what we do. Again, like a non-trivial portion that's not like super well aligned to what we do. And like so I had a sales rep that was new at the time we made that acquisition. And, it's like, hey, here's a book of business to like start with, like go grow this. So I put her on it. So I wasn't directly managing the accounts, but it's like now the question is like, is her time more valuably spent like prospecting for business that we would better service? And then I think also just over time, like, it's the whole idea of like, staying in your niche and like being able to expand margins by being really, really good at like one or two things as opposed to being like not very good at a lot of things. Right. And I think that's kind of what I've learned. And how I think about acquisitions now is very much aligned to like a thesis I have about our industry and how I think I can build like a true platform and kind of what that looks like over the course of the next like 10 to 20 plus years, and where I can like increase the multiple. And a lot of that has to do with focused attention and energy on like very specific things. And so because of that, I've kind of broadened my geographic search because I'm more picky about the types of businesses I'm looking for. I do think over time that is actually the better strategy as opposed to buying locally and being less discriminating about what I buy and then just kind of like expanding out. If we just stay more focused on what we're really good at, this sounds like so obvious, but it took me like having to having to learn this lesson in a very painful way. That's actually going to increase margins and expand multiples over time. So that's actually the better thing to do.
Thank you for sharing that lesson.
Yeah.
So it sounds like through an acquisition, you can grow potentially faster. In your case, it's preferable to expand your search nationally and keep within the niche that you're operating so that you're performing at your best.
Yeah, and for me, it's like all about like how do we serve as like an extension of a multi-location brand's marketing operations team, right? So like production of printed materials, kitting and fulfillment, and like being able to do that in a programmatic way. That's where there's like potentially like a real durable and like scalable platform here, I believe. And that's like something I'm really excited about building. But yeah, it requires being much more focused in like how I think about acquisitions.
Connor, it's been such a pleasure learning from you. We have questions with which we always wrap up the pod. Does a printing business use AI?
Yes, I use AI all the time. um, I use ChatGPT and Claude really like as a collaborative tool to kind of like think through like acquisition strategy or like to like structure my thoughts. I think like pretty typical AI use case.
Let's talk about that. So how do you use AI to think through acquisitions?
I kind of like built out a template of what does the $100 million valuation version of this business look like? What does that business do? How does it create value? What kind of customers does it serve? How is it structured? Like all those things. And so I like really want to get like a super clear idea of that and then, kind of like work backwards from there. And so AI is super helpful and like, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I think. Like help me structure like a document that can like organize my thinking around how to approach this. And then the goal is to get like a document that I have that I can use to kind of guide our strategy and particularly as it relates to acquisitions, like how we think about like whether or not an acquisition is worth pursuing. And I've used it to pass on a handful of deals already. So it's been helpful in that regard. But yeah, so I think, obviously you got to be careful with that because like AI kind of just tells you what you want to hear, right? So it's like, I probably like lean into its recommendation maybe a little bit too much. But in terms of like structuring a document that I can use to reference, it's extremely helpful. And same thing with like documenting processes internally, right? Like it's super helpful for that. There's a lot of stuff that we do, particularly for apparel and promotional products, which we outsource. So we don't produce those in-house, but we manage the order flow with our vendors. And it's very administrative heavy work. I think that agentic AI tools, or even just tools that leverage AI to automate work, presents a huge opportunity for us to continue to grow without adding headcount in a linear way. One of the challenges we have is just lack of operating leverage. So if we grow, the team grows, right? That's kind of always going to be the case, but instead of it being a linear relationship, I would like the relationship to be more like a software company and less like a manufacturing company.
Connor, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome learning from you. Thank you for coming on to the pod.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.